We have our attendees. Hey, we are back from our breaks at the Modern Data Stack Conference, day one, focused on analytics and business. I'm really excited to introduce Kate from Story by Data. She's our next speaker. I have worked with her for a number of years on different projects. Kate is what you would call a hustler, a data hustler. Not only is she an amazing analyst who's worked at companies like Deloitte and is now consulting on her own at Story by Data, she's also an advocate for women in data. She is a podcaster, a video producer, always online, always propping up everyone, and also giving amazing information. So we're super excited. Kate, take it away. We're so excited to see your talk on visualization best practices.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, Jason. Never been called a hustler in an intro before, so I love it. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining the talk on data visualization best practices. Just going to make sure that I've got screen share access. Yes, I do. Awesome. All right, let's get right into it. So data visualization, right? I think most people are familiar with it. It's drawing pictures or graphs, charts with data. But there are things we can do to our data visualizations that can take them from being good to being really great. So going on to our first slide here, I see data visualization as needing to be three things, right? It needs to be informative, appealing, and efficient. So informative basically means it has to actually tell a data story. It has to inform your audience and answer the data question. Appealing, that's basically means an appealing data visualization is something that is attractive. It looks good. It can attract your audience's attention and keep their attention. People tend to want to look at data visualization when it's appealing. And efficient. So efficient means try not to confuse your audience. I know most people don't start out with the intention to confuse their audience, but there are things you can do to make your data visualization more efficient by using the right chart to begin with and doing some of the things we're going to cover in this quick session. So today I'm going to talk about the three ways you can actually enhance your data visualization. So there's section one is on layout and chart selection. So basically identifying the right chart that is going to represent your data and making sure that you're really highlighting the key takeaway from your data story. The second thing we'll talk about is reducing clutter. So removing anything that's not necessary in your view can actually really help your data visualization stand out. And then the last thing we'll talk about is the intentional use of color, because when you're being intentional with your use of color, you can actually really help tell that data story. And when your use of color is non-intentional or kind of random, you can actually end up confusing your audience. So let's go ahead into section one, right? Layout and chart selection. So a couple of things to keep in mind here. Number one, data visualization needs to be designed with your specific audience in mind, right? So when you're designing a chart or a graph, think about who's going to see this? How are they going to use this? Is this going to be presented on a big screen somewhere or on a tiny laptop or printed out? So it's that forward thinking. Then make sure that it's clear on how to interact with the visualization. So these days we've got all these data viz tools that allow you to filter or drill down on specific data. And you have to really make sure that it's clear for users to actually go ahead and do that. One way to test this is to just give it to somebody and have them use it, somebody who's never played with your dashboard or data viz before, and see if they're, they got a confused look on their face, then chances are they cannot use it, and you have to be clear in how you put that together. Next, objects work together to find a clearly highlight the key takeaway message. So objects here means different charts, graphs, titles, annotations. They all have to work together in order to paint that big picture of what you're trying to share as your takeaway message. And then I also talk about limiting the use of complex or fancy charts. What I mean here is there are charts that have been popping up that look really, really attractive, right? A lot of times you have no idea what we're looking at, but those charts are good for maybe attracting your audience to come up to your dashboard and then use, bar chart or line graph to actually tell that story. But I definitely recommend people stick to the basics because it saves you time in trying to explain to your audience what it is they're looking at. And then lastly, chart type is appropriate for the data. So once you have your data question, and you have the data that you're going to use to answer that question, one thing to keep in mind is there are specific chart types that are better for specific data. Let me go ahead and show you my DATAcated chart selector guide. So this is something I use as part of my DATAcated Academy, where I teach people visual best practices. And it basically shows you a high level view into the different chart types, right? So what type of data would you like to present? Is it comparison, relationship, composition, distribution? And then within each of those broad buckets, you have specific chart types that you can use. Next to each chart type, I'm going to go through a couple of examples here. Next to each chart type, there's a description. So for example, a single line chart here displays trends over a period of time for a single category. So you would use a single line chart if you're trying to show trends over a period of time for a category. It's pretty intuitive, I know, but I think a lot of times I've seen charts misused. And I think it's simply because people might not be familiar with all the different chart types and their uses. Next is the tree map, right? So this shows a hierarchical part to whole relationship. And then a symbols map, which is basically a map view with bubbles on it that shows geographic data using a symbol plotted over latitude or longitude. So you'll need something like a city field or something like that to use that chart. All right, moving on to section 2, reducing clutter. Now, this just means removing any unnecessary elements in the view to improve the quality and the impact. So here, less is more. What tends to happen when we get our hands on these database tools is we can visualize very easily and very quickly, right? So we can put 15 different charts in a dashboard. We can use so many colors and add text and all of these images and icons, and things start to get cluttered. So what we need to do is be very intentional. Now, let's walk through a couple of items here. The first one says any icons or images are used to support interpretation. What this means is don't simply put a smiley face on your chart to brighten people's day. Any icon or image that you're using has to have a purpose. It has to help tell that data story. A lot of times images really do help that data to tell that data story. You just have to be careful in how you use them. Data legends. So now there are legends like color, size, shape. You just have to make sure that you're positioning those legends right next to the relevant data. I think the default settings in a lot of these data viz tools, they don't really do that for you. So you just have to be conscious and intentional with how you do that. For the next 3, I actually have some slides. So let's go ahead into them. Grid lines are not present or muted. So what this means is grid lines are either light gray or some sort of light shade color, and borders are removed. So examples here on the left, we've got the grid lines, and then on the right, we have muted grid lines. Now, grid lines are there to help us really, match up the data points to the axes. But a lot of times, if we have the actual data points on the chart, we don't even need the axes or the grid lines. So we can talk about that. And then the borders on the bottom, it just basically, these are rules, right? But they can be broken at times. So I should have said that in the beginning. All of these things I'm discussing right now, a lot of times you could add borders to even help you with your data visualization. These are just some things to consider, put them on, take them off, and see what looks better, because sometimes they can actually help. So one thing I'd recommend if you're going to remove borders is maybe add a little bit more white space between your objects to make it easier to tell those objects apart. All right, the next thing here, values are formatted to a suitable level of precision and use applicable display units. So what does that mean? If you're talking about dollars, use a dollar symbol. If you're talking about inches, use IN for inches. Same goes with percentages and other symbols that you can think of. And then the suitable level of precision, that just means if you're trying to show exact values, then go ahead and include the decimals. But sometimes you can round up numbers to the thousands or the millions so people can easily compare categories or values without having to really read the entire detailed number. Okay, graphs are two-dimensional, so please avoid 3D or bevel shapes. Now, it looks like my slide was slightly transformed, but the 3D pie chart is supposed to be a lot more 3D for this example to work. But essentially what I wanted to explain here was that if you look at categories A and E, right? So A is up here, sorry, A and F, A is up here and F is the red one. They're both equal to 25% of that pie chart. But if you were to look at a 3D pie chart, you would see that F appears to be larger than A just because it's in the forefront and things in the background appear smaller. So that's my little thing of avoiding 3D or shape bevels. They can really end up confusing your audience. So try to avoid 3D. Now, the last section here is all about the use of color. And I think we could probably spend, I don't know, a couple of hours just talking about the proper use of color, because color really makes your data visualization a lot better, right? If you picture a data visualization that's absent of any color, it's really hard to understand what's happening there. So a few things we'll cover are, let's go ahead in there. Color is used to highlight key patterns and guides the viewers. So what this means is be intentional on how you actually use the color. So use it to actually guide your user's attention. You can use, you know, a bright color somewhere where you really want, like a bright red color where you want your audience to really look at the specific data point that maybe, you know, a department is falling behind on their sales. You can color that department bright red or bright orange to really bring home that point. So basically be intentional. That's the overarching point for use of color, is to be intentional. Supporting data is muted or light gray. Now, what this means is I always say that gray is your best friend when you're visualizing data, because you can start with a grayscale and you can use gray for basically anything that is not your primary data story, right? So things like your annotations or your axes or your borders or your grid lines, like we talked about earlier. You can use gray to help, you know, tell that story without overwhelming your audience, because once people start to see color, it gives them significance, right? We have an example here of sales and profit analysis for copiers. Now you'll notice there are a lot of gray and a couple of blue points on this scatter plot. We have profit versus sales. And what we're showing here is I think there are probably 5 or 6 different categories that we're looking at, and I grayed them all out, everything except copiers, because the focus here is on copiers. So now you can easily spot those copiers because they're all the blue points. Now, if you're presenting to, you know, the head of the copiers department, this is a good presentation to make because now they can focus. They don't have to look at every single one of those copiers and try to differentiate them. We could have, let's say if we had, you know, 5, 6 categories, we could have used 5, 6 different colors for all those categories, but that can actually end up confusing people, because then it becomes like a little rainbow or, you know, taste the Skittles type of chart where you're just looking at a lot of colors and it kind of distracts you. This is helping people actually focus on the data that you're trying to get them to focus on. Okay. Patterns are still viewable when printed in black and white and considering color blindness. Now, 1 in 12 men, and I believe it's 1 in 400 women, and I'm pretty sure the statistic is just in the US, suffer from color blindness. And what this means is they can't really see the difference between red and green. That's one of the most common ones. There are other color blindness out there, but the most common one is the inability to see the differences between different hues of red and green. Now, if you look at the original graph here, sales by subcategory, we've got different colors, right? It's kind of like the colors of parts of the colors of the rainbow, but we've got a lot of reds and we got a lot of greens in here. Now, if we were to look down to the red-green color blindness, you'll notice that those colors start to blend together. There's a site, I believe it's Color Brewer 2, or there are several sites online if you just Google red-green color blindness, where you can actually upload your data visualizations and it will show you what this looks like to somebody who suffers from color blindness. So that's what I did here. That's why you're able to see this red-green color blindness. It's interesting, if anyone in the audience actually has red-green color blindness, you probably see the original and the red-green color blindness chart as the same. And then on the right here, we have something called desaturated. And this simply means this is what your chart would look like if it were to be printed in black and white, right? If your printer runs out of color, or if you find yourself working remotely these days where you no longer have your color corporate printer that you can use all day, and you're printing in black and white, that is what you would see. So my point here is try to consider that the option that your data visualization that you've spent, hours or days working at might be either viewed by somebody who can't really see the differences between those colors, or printed in black and white, where again, they lose that color. All right, no more than 5 colors are used in a data visualization. Now, again, that rule might be broken at times, but my point here again is try to keep your number of colors in your view to probably less than 5. If you see yourself, using 12 different colors in a chart, maybe consider using a different chart. Maybe consider filtering your data on a specific subset so you can focus, or graying everything else out. There's a great site here, Color Brewer 2.0, that you can go to that actually provides you some really cool sequential, diverging, and qualitative color schemes, where you can just get the hex value or RGB value and put that into your either your Python or R code or your data viz tools, whatever it is you're using. The cool thing here is you can also check a box that says colorblind safe, print friendly, or photocopy safe. And what that does is it actually uses colors that will be, you'll still be able to differentiate if somebody is colorblind or will print it in black and white. All right. Consistent color is used for same variables. Now, this is important because this is what I was alluding to in the beginning of the talk when I said if you're using colors randomly, you might end up confusing your audience. And what this means is a lot of times we put, let's say, 4 or 5 charts in a view and we color them with default colors. And what these data viz softwares don't really have built in right now is a smart feature that says, okay, we used blue here for, let's say, the US region, and now we're using blue for, let's say, basketball or something random, right? What we need to think about as data viz creators or, data visualization developers is humans tend to think that like things belong together, right? So they'll think, okay, blue here and blue here, that means US and basketball, something's got to be going on. And it could be, right, if that's actually true. But what I've seen, common mistake I've seen made is those, that's not true, where the blue is kind of used randomly. And what I'm trying to tell you here is consistent color is used for the same variable. Let's walk through this example. So we've got 3 categories. We've got furniture, office supplies, and technology. Furniture is blue, office supplies is orange, and technology is gray. Now, those colors are distinct enough that we're able to tell the differences just by looking at them, right? Even if we're printing this in black and white, or if we've got color blindness. So step 1 is done. We're not using more than 5 colors in the view, so step 2 is done. Now, we're using the same colors for the categories because if you look at the line graph, sales by category over time, we have blue for furniture, orange for office supplies, and gray for technology. And on the left, we've got sales by subcategory, but we're using the same colors of the category because phones, machines, and anything else that's gray belong to the tech category, and storage, binders, paper, and anything else that's orange belongs to office supplies. So it can let us basically understand that full story by just using the specific colors. Okay, so my main message for everybody here is do not accept the default settings. Take the steps necessary to enhance your visualizations and dashboards to effectively tell your data story. Now, once you put your data visualization together, right, it's an iterative process. So don't think that you've made it and now you're done. Show it to a couple of people, test it out with your audience, test it out with your target audience to be specific. You have to make sure that people who are going to use these data viz and dashboards can actually know how to use them, can interpret them, can understand them. And yes, spend the extra 15 minutes, playing with the default settings. There are so many options and features that you can play with to actually take your data visualization from just looking good to being really great and effective at telling that data story. Now, I hope I shared enough with everybody here in I think it was about 20 minutes or so. And at this point, I just want to let you know that you can contact me at kate@storybydata.com if you want to follow up with any questions. I'm on Twitter at storybydata. I'm definitely on LinkedIn if you just look for Kate Strachnyi. And at this point, just want to thank you for joining my talk and hand it back over to Jason to see if there's a Q&A.
Yeah, we've had some questions come in, but before we get to that, I wanted to highlight something. Kate has a conference coming up next week called DATAcated. If you want to hear more on this subject and a whole bunch of others, Kate, do you want to drop a URL or pitch the conference real quick?
Yes, DATAcated conference, the first ever conference hosted fully on LinkedIn Live. It's my first conference. We have over 5,000 people signed up so far. Free to attend if people want to hop in there. It's basically storybydata.com/DATAcated conference. So definitely join us. We have 16 speakers in only 4 hours. It's October 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern. Thank you for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have a few questions that have come in. Are you a fan of the Adobe Color Wheel for color setup?
I've actually not used the Adobe Color Wheel, but I'll be sure to check that out.
Okay. What are the rules about using bright or dimmer colors?
I think it depends. If you're going for a cheerful tone for your data visualization, then definitely the brighter colors. But if you're trying to keep things more professional and serious, I'd go with the dim colors. But it also depends on the purpose of the data visualization and where it's going to end up.
Okay. And what color alternatives do you recommend for visuals to be colorblind safe when the business asks for a gauge with red, yellow, green?
Yes, absolutely. So orange and blue have been the go-to for, I think, most of the data visualization community because they're very colorblind safe, they're printer safe. And you can kind of assume that orange is bad and blue is good if we're talking about, red is bad and green is good type of scale. So I've used that quite a bit and it's been very effective.
Okay. A tongue-in-cheek question. What has the better color palette, M&Ms or Skittles?
I like Skittles. They're so bright and colorful.
Same. Is it worth using tools such as D3.js or Plotly to make innovative visualizations from scratch?
So I've not seen D3, but I've seen some really awesome Plotly visualizations. I think if there's a need, use it. There are so many tools out there, though. It doesn't really matter what you end up using as long as you're following visual best practices and making sure that your visualization really tells that data story.
I have a question. As a colorblind analyst, I oftentimes struggle to add colors to charts which are useful without being gaudy. Are there standardized color palettes with RGB codes I can lean on when building visualizations for non-colorblind users?
Yes, absolutely. So I highly recommend you go, and I mentioned this in the talk, it's called Color Brewer 2.0, where you can actually select color schemes for sequential or different basically categorical colors, and they'll provide you with a color scheme with hex values or RGB codes that you can actually use.
Okay, cool. What I really liked about your talk is, we were chatting now about color blindness and color choice and all that stuff, but the higher level thing I heard was distill the story down to the main elements and be simple. Don't try to convolute the message.
Yes, absolutely. Be simple and be, I think, intentional. I probably said the word like 50 times during the talk because all these things, you just have to really think about what you're doing as you're doing them or even before you're doing them. And then your data story will just come out a lot clearer.
Have you ever been asked by management or a stakeholder to use fancy graphics because they saw them somewhere else? And then how did you coach that person out of wanting that if they did?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think people are highly drawn to fancy graphics and they want their dashboards to look cool. And I think showing them how confusing it can be by actually giving them this fancy graphic. And I actually even qualify pie charts sometimes as those, or donut charts as fancy graphics because they're not very good at telling the story, especially the 3D exploding pie charts that can really throw people off. I think giving them a demonstration that shows, okay, you can't really make out what you're trying to tell people and showing them the good versus the recommendation, which is typically to go simple, definitely helps.
Sorry, I was muted. One question, a little different subject, because I know this is a passion of yours. When it comes to visualization, learning SQL, getting up to speed, what resources or training materials would you recommend someone who's data curious and maybe is good at Excel, that sort of thing, and want to take the next step? Wow, what would you suggest to them?
Yeah, I think a couple of options, right? So it depends on what tool they're going to use. If you're trying to learn a specific tool and how to visualize in that tool, let's say Tableau or Power BI, for example, those companies actually have a lot of free resources directly on their site. I feel like people tend to ignore that for some reason. A lot of them do it really, really well, where that's how I learned how to use Tableau, Click, Power BI, is using those built-in resources. I feel like people Google for the easy method or a course that they can sign up for. And I know I'm not promoting my DATAcated Academy really well here by telling people there's free stuff out there, but I highly recommend people use the free stuff, go on YouTube. But then the main recommendation here is, after you've picked up a couple of those tips, because they're really easy to learn, is actually practice, right? So take a data set and actually visualize the data and share it with your either social community or your work community, and get some feedback.
Yeah. And then for data sets, look at Kaggle, there's public data sets you can find. I know I live near Portland, and city of Portland in Oregon does a lot of public data sets, which is cool. And it's really fun. Once you start putting out ideas, you might come up with a data set. Like I remember 10 years ago, someone took a public data set out of Portland and actually wrote an app that would notify when the street sweepers were coming, because they would just ticket people. So ask people like what they're curious about with the data set, and you'll get some ideas. So I like that idea of using your own social network to fuel the curiosity and kind of know what questions to ask of the data. Then you can go and figure out how to write the query and stuff to get to the point. Nick from in the chat, it says, if you use Snowflake, there's a really good place called the Snowflake Data Exchange.
Okay, yeah, I was actually going to suggest, I recently interviewed the founder of Google's dataset search.
Yes.
And they've got some really great data sets as well that you can filter on the data type and exactly what you're looking for. So another tool there.
Yeah, that's true. One last question, and then we'll close. How did you reach your ideas and theories around visualization? Like, where did you start, and then how did you perfect your craft?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all started with, simply I was given a task at work to build my first data visualization, and it was probably terrible. I probably blocked it from memory, but I would Google what good looks like on Google Images, literally just look for great dashboards for inspiration. But then I also took, some online courses, and I read a lot of books like Edward Tufte's books and Cole Knaflich's Data Storytelling, or Storytelling with Data. That was actually my first data book ever. And, there are plenty of resources online if you simply know what you're looking for. But that was my journey.
That's great. That's great. Really appreciate all this. We're going to close. So in 5 minutes, we have a session with Clary to learn about driving innovation and revenue via analytics. So to join that next session, just join us in 5 minutes. It's the next item in your Pathable thing. And then one thing that I've been wanting to point out is there's a view in Pathable called Theater View. And it's really great for if you want to see the whole screen and see the person talking and their slides. It'll be really important in a couple sessions when we have a panel. That way you'll be able to see all the panelists on one screen. So if you haven't used Theater View, be sure to check that out. Thank you again, Kate, and we'll see you on the next session.
Thank you.
Trifacta empowers everyone to prepare messy and diverse data faster. It's a data preparation platform built for the speed of modern business. With Trifacta, you can bring together more data faster, whether you need to prepare data for analytics, machine learning, or standard reporting. So what data do you need to wrangle? Get started with Trifacta today.
Data. It's everywhere. With every click, swipe, view, purchase, and shipment, your business creates data. And all that data can help you run your business better. But how do you analyze it? Some solutions are too complex. Only the data team has access, which forces everyone to wait for answers. And wait, and sometimes they give up and stop asking. Other solutions let everyone do their own analysis, but only with parts of the data, so no one has the big picture. How can you give everyone in your company a consistent and reliable picture of what's happening in your business? You turn to Looker, a data platform that's speedy to deploy and can work on top of any analytic database. Looker makes it simple to describe your data and define business metrics that the entire company can agree and rely on. Once you have a reliable source of truth for your business data, anyone on your team can analyze and explore it, ask and answer their own questions, create visualizations, and drill down to row-level detail. Then everyone can share discoveries with a simple link, and every answer becomes the inspiration to explore more. Looker, a data platform that both data analysts and business teams can rely on.